If you're a freelance designer, no matter what kind of work you're doing, there's one thing you need to avoid, and that is not being paid. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about some red flags that you can identify early on when talking to a client that might be a sign that they're not going to pay you or just that they're going to drive you insane. If you're new around here, my name is Jack and I'm a freelance graphic designer working mainly in the music industry, but I also run a website called studioAAA.com, and over the years I've worked on a ton of projects, big and small, and I've also hired people to work on my own projects for Studio AAA and sometimes on behalf of clients as well. So hopefully some of what I can tell you today will help you avoid working with insane clients in your freelance career, or at least help you identify them early on so that you are prepared. A lot of stuff like this just comes with experience, but one thing I've learned from being a full-time freelancer over the last 4 or 5 years is that preserving your mental health and your sanity is just as important as making money. And for me personally, the worst things my mental health when I'm freelancing are just clients who are insane. So to get straight into the video, the first type of client that I want to tell you about today is the overpromiser client. So the overpromiser is going to talk to you about how great their opportunity is, how much future work they'll give you, how many people are going to see your work, how big the project is, and a bunch of other stuff that usually sounds too good to be true. Overpromising is a big red flag to me for a lot of reasons, but the first one being that through hiring people to work on my own brand and my own projects, I've learned that actually you are putting quite a lot of trust in someone when you hire them, especially if they're working on something that you care about. And because I've only ever hired people to work on things that I actually care about, I have never and will never promise somebody future work until they've earned my trust. So to me, if someone is promising me future work and big opportunities for working with them before they even know me, it tells me that they're either lying or they might just not care about their project. Another reason it is a red flag is obviously when it comes down to it, if you're being paid to design for somebody and the pay is right and it's in your area of expertise or your field of interest, why is there a need to convince someone to accept the work? The reason these people overpromise is because the promises almost always come right before a lowball offer, a stupidly low budget, or an insane workload. Clients who overpromise are to be avoided because at best they are just inexperienced and don't really know what they're doing. At worst, they are trying to take advantage of designers who are inexperienced by promising them things that they can't deliver on. If you do choose to accept work from someone who is overpromising, make sure you don't find yourself relying on these empty promises. Take a deposit to protect yourself, do the work and move on. Don't bank on or schedule for or make time for the future stuff that they might be telling you about. Just do what's there today and then move on. The next type of client that you should be aware of is the short notice client. So the short notice client is going to tell you how much they appreciate you taking on their work. They might even do a little bit of overpromising as well, but generally they want all the benefits of hiring you with none of the negatives of hiring you on short notice. The short notice client is a red flag for many very obvious reasons, but the main reason comes back to the fact that if you have a project that you care about, you don't leave things until last minute, and it's as simple as that really. Outside of design, if you have something that you care about, you give that stuff the time it needs. You don't just rush it through last minute. For me, when I'm approached to work on short notice by someone I've never worked with before, the first thing I'm asking them about is deliverables. If it's something small, I can kind of excuse that. Stuff like that happens. We are just getting like the final details done last minute. But if I'm being asked to do a whole album cover, lyric video, merch design, whatever on short notice, which does happen quite a lot in music, I'm just like, okay, this is probably going to cost me quite a lot of sanity. Is this person actually going to pay me on time if they can't even get their own stuff organized? Is this actually going to be worth it for me to take on? Obviously, everyone's financial situations are different. I've accepted work when I really needed the money that I probably should have said no to, and that's fine. It's entirely up to you what you accept and don't accept, but if you accept short notice work, you are well within your rights to charge a rush fee and make it very clear that short notice is not how you work best. I can't price your work for you obviously, but what I can tell you is that if somebody is hiring you on short notice, you are well within your rights to up your prices on them, charge a rush fee, and be really strict with what you charge, because at the end of the day, they can always just say, okay, well, I'll delay this project and give you more time to avoid the extra fees. For example, if you were to usually charge someone £500 or dollars or whatever for whatever it is you're being asked for, and you usually take 2 weeks to do whatever your work is, they want you to do it in 3 or 4 days. If you make it clear that you're going to charge them £800 or £900 or £1,000 or whatever to do it in that shorter time period, then tell them it usually costs this much without rushing it. Then if they really care about working with you and they're on a budget, they can just push their project back. Obviously, if people work in events and stuff, like, that's not always the case, but you don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe someone stressing yourself out for working on short notice. It will impact your mental health. It can cause you to burn out when you do a load of work in a short period of time that you would usually take a lot longer on. So yeah, just make sure you prioritize yourself and get paid for it and set some boundaries early on. Speaking of boundaries, the next type of client you should be aware of is the no boundaries client. So the no boundaries client is probably asking you to hop on a call before you've agreed to any kind of work or even on a price. The no boundaries client is probably asking you for your personal phone number. They're emailing you on a weekend. They're phoning you unprompted, maybe without booking anything in. There are two types of people who do this. The first is, in my opinion, just like maybe innocent and new to whatever it is they're doing. They might be inexperienced and not used to being professional. They've maybe never worked with a freelancer before, so they might be nervous. That can kind of be excused. But the other type of no boundary client is that one that, in my opinion, you definitely want to avoid working with. So this is a lesson that you maybe will learn the hard way, because if you haven't learned it already, it maybe doesn't sound that important, but doing things like giving your personal phone number to a client can end in, literally, this happened to me, getting phone calls at 1 a.m, getting like back-to-back text messages and emails and stuff from someone who you've not even accepted work from. And if you've got other things you're working on, that can be really stressful, and it can blur like a boundary you may have between your personal life and your professional life, basically. So you can avoid being in situations like that by setting clear and normal boundaries with clients. For example, if you get an email on a Saturday evening, write out your reply and schedule it to just send on Monday at 9 a.m. A lot of designers as well put in their bio now to only commission by email, which is a really easy thing to ask for. Adding boundaries like this, even if you're like me and you probably will be doing design work on a weekend anyway, or if you don't really mind a DM, you're setting up what is basically a quality filter for people. If someone can't wait from a Saturday to a Monday for a reply to their email, or if they can't read the bit on your profile that says commission by email, do you think that person is going to pay you on time or respect you, or do you think they're going to ask for tons of changes and be really disorganized? That might sound like you're making quite a lot of judgments just off of one thing, but what I can tell you is that someone who does respect the bit in your bio that says no DMs, and someone that can wait from a Saturday to a Monday for a reply to their email, is someone who is actually probably enthusiastic about working with you rather than just finding a designer, and those are the people that you want to work with. So it's totally up to you if you want to accept work without putting boundaries like that in place. Most people will respect you either way, but eventually when you run into one of these people who wants to push your boundaries, that's kind of when you'll learn the lesson, and that's when you'll let it stress you out. The last type of client I want to tell you about is the corporate email thread client. I couldn't really come up with a better name for that one, but I've had good experiences with corporate clients and I've also had really bad ones. For me, there's only really one way to deal with this type of client and have it not end up being a nightmare. To explain what I mean a little bit, if you've ever worked in an office or for a big company, you'll know there's tons of different departments for different things. If you want to get this done, you have to fill out this form, or if you want to get that done, you have to contact this specific person from this department, and so on. People who work inside these like corporate structures get so used to it that when you're brought in as a freelancer, they don't really do a good job sometimes of explaining to you who's who you're being hired by, who's getting you paid, who's signing off on changes and things like that. So if you find yourself accepting some work and immediately being added onto an email thread with 8 or 9 people CC'd into it, and names you don't recognize, or Zoom calls with loads of people who just sit there and don't talk while you talk to one person awkwardly, then you may have found yourself one of these clients. The first thing you need to do to stop this from turning into like a red flag is identify the decision maker or the person who's going to be giving you direction within the email thread or the corporate whatever structure that you've been given, and confirm who you're sending deliverables to, who you're taking feedback from, and where your invoice is going. In a big corporate structure, the person who brings you in for a project might not actually be internally responsible for paying your invoice. The person who is approving your work might not be responsible for bringing you in, and then the person who pays your invoice might actually have no idea who you are because they just work in like a finance department, and it can be confusing and quite jarring if you're just used to working directly with a client. The good thing is when you deal with this type of client, they have deeper pockets and can pay you more generally, so it's just going to be a headache for you if you aren't able to work out who is who. At some point when you accept one of these projects, on a Zoom call or on an email thread, you'll be asked, do you have any more questions? At that point, just be direct and ask who you should be taking feedback from, who you should be taking direction and changes from, and once you're off that call, send that person an email so you've got it all in writing as well. It can be a bit intimidating if you're on a Zoom call or whatever with like a major record label or big corporate people, but the situation you want to avoid is where all 10 people on that Zoom call are giving you feedback and you don't know who to listen to, or all 10 people from the email thread in all different departments are giving you their opinion and you don't know who to prioritize. I've had that happen to me before, but the best experience I've had for this is when I worked for Sony Music in 2022 and 2023. There was one of those email threads and a few of those Zoom calls, but I would get feedback from multiple people involved in what I was working on and just take all that feedback to a creative director, and they would just tell me which bits of feedback to ignore and which bits to prioritize. After learning that's how they do it, that's kind of how I try to do all my corporate client work now. I don't think the corporate people like intentionally make that difficult, and I don't think that really comes from like an incompetence or a bad place. It's just that when you're freelance and you're independent, going into a big structure like that can just be confusing. There are obviously many more red flags for clients, but these 4 are the ones that I think if you miss can really cause you a lot of stress. And since my last freelancing video was about making more money, I wanted to do one that was about having less stress, because the goal in any job really, in my opinion, is more money and less stress. So I hope this helped. If you want some more help freelancing, I make one free design resource every single month at studioAAA.com. So go check that out if you like. I'll leave a link in the description. Other than that, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.